What's up everyone, David Seven Skies here, broadcasting from the Seven Skies Mansion, and today it's a serum day. We're gonna be looking at 7 things you probably didn't know about serum. But before we start, please smash that subscribe button and the bell button right next to it, because I will be online for 30 minutes after I publish this video and we can do a little chitty chat. But now, time to see the 7 things about serum that you probably didn't know. Number 1, LFO utilities and hidden functions. Alright, so we open our serum, and the first thing I'm gonna do is actually, since we can do that and since a lot of people bitch about it, let's make our serum gigantic. So, serum's gigantic. Let's look at the LFO. The LFO is one of the best things in serum, and it comes with a lot of perks. You can, create points, drag stuff around. Everything can be synced to the song tempo. It's amazing. It's definitely the best LFO out there on the market. No matter what scenes you're looking at, serum definitely has the best LFO in my opinion. One thing you may not know, I mean, this is not a super secret, but one thing you may not know is that if you create an LFO shape and you want to copy it across the other LFOs, what you can do is you grab the LFO and then hit Alt and release it, and there you go. You can copy the LFO across. So now let's go back to our original LFO, and I want to show you a couple things. The first thing is, if you create 2 points, let's put one down here and one up here, just like that. If you drag and go over the points, you can select both points, and if you you can move them together. If you are not holding anything, you can just move them around. If you go up and down, they'll go up and down. But if you hold shift, what's going to happen is that they will go opposite directions, just like that. Sometimes it's handy. I don't use this function a lot, but I can see it being handy sometimes. Once again, if you don't hold shift, there you go. It just goes whatever direction you're going. And if you're holding shift, this is what happens. Obviously, left and right is not going to change anything. Even if I'm holding shift, you can see it's just going left and right. All right, so let's go back to the normal LFO. Now there's another thing that some people might not know, and is you can basically lock every point to the grid so that you can be 100% sure that all the points are in perfect time with the grid in serum and also in your song. And how do you do that? Well, you simply hit Alt, and here I'm dragging, I'm not holding Alt. As soon as I hit Alt, there you go. You see that the point is snapping to my LFO. This is pretty cool. This is super handy when you want to make tempo-based LFO sequences and all that kind of stuff. This is very, very handy. Another thing that is very handy in serum, it's kind of a hidden function, is holding shift while dragging stuff around. And what that does is that it basically creates steps. So there you go. It creates steps automatically. You just have to hit shift. Obviously, if you hit shift and alt at the same time, what you do is also having the step that snaps to the grid. That's even more handy. Another thing, depending on the grid size, you are gonna create smaller or bigger steps. Now we're at 16. If we go down to, for example, let's say 4, you'll see that the steps are as big as the grid. So they're bigger because it's 4 and this is 16, so we get smaller step. This is really good when you want to do, like I said, gate effects or arpeggiated effects. There you go. Just do this kind of stuff, and it's pretty quick. Instead of putting like manually 3 points per step, you just hit shift and it will just do it for you. Now there is another thing on the LFO that I want to show you, but I am going to keep that as the last thing because it's one of the nerdiest thing. It's, I don't know, I kind of like it. It's one of my favorite things, one of the things that probably nobody really knows or very few people know about it. So I'm going to keep it as a last thing. But now let's move on to the next function. Number 2, filter phase and filter mix. Right, the next function has to do with the filter. And if we turn on our filter, we, just play a note. We have our filter, everything works as expected. But if you notice here, all the knobs have this background while the mix knob has a different background. The reason why is so that you can toggle between mix and level. And what does mix do and what does level do? The mix is basically letting your oscillators through the filter without being filtered. This is particularly handy when you want to create some crazy stuff, or if you want to balance the filter. For example, the reverb filter over here is a very heavy filter. Sometimes you don't want to have that much filter affecting your sound. So what you can do is mix it out a little bit. You're gonna have both the filter and the original signal from the oscillators that is running through the filter. Another thing, let's go back to our Moog filter. Let's go to 12. Another thing is old synthesizer actually used to have a little bit of a leaking of the filter. So basically the oscillator would sort of leak through the filter. It would bleed out. It would bleed through the filter. And I think it's Monarch from Native Instrument that actually has a filter bleed. And I think it's just 95-97%. You can have this little bit of sound just passing through the filter. I'm not a crazy fan of this, but it's an option in case you want it. Now, the level, on the other hand, what it does is basically working as a gain. So, for example, if I turn on oscillator 2 and I don't run it through my filter, this is what I get. But if I am taking down the level of my filter, you'll hear that oscillator 1, oscillator A, is going to get quieter and quieter, while oscillator B is just going to sound at a normal level. That's it. So sometimes, once again, you might want to have a very heavy filter, and for some reason you want to use this level as opposed to this level. I don't know why you would want to do that, but you never know. Possibilities are endless when it comes to sound design. So in that case, you would just simply use the level of the filter, and you would be able to sort of set the volume of your filter. There's another thing that I want to show you that not a lot of people know, or maybe you may have stumbled upon it. It's the phase of the sound, which you get from filtering stuff, and that you can see it if you just click over here. You'll see that now the filter turns green, and you see the phase, and this is basically the phase of the sound being filtered. Now like I said, I don't really use it. I don't really care. I trust my ears more than I trust my eyes, so I never really toggle to this view, but it's there in case you want to see it. So this is it with the filter. Let's move on to the third function that you probably don't know about Serum. At number 3, we have lock the effects chain. Okay, the third function that you probably don't know about Serum is something that is right in front of your eyes, but a lot of people never used it, or they didn't know you could actually do this. What I'm talking about, locking the effect chain. So sometimes, let's say you have a preset or something that you use and it has a really good setting. For example, on a lead, or in this case, I'm using my new 808 preset pack, which is called Boom. It's out now, by the way. And I don't know, this, let's pretend this setting works particularly well for 808s, and I have this whole pack of 808s, but this is my favorite effect rec, and I just want to use it across all my preset, or at least I just want to hear how my presets sound with this chain. Now what I can do is save the chain, the effects chain, and I can import it every time I load a new preset, but that obviously takes time. So let's just turn on the distortion here so you can hear better what's going on. This is the sound without distortion, in case you're wondering. I'm super proud about this library, by the way. Anyway, so let's say I have this chain, and this chain is amazing, and I want to have it in the next, in all the 808s that I have in this pack. I want to hear how it sounds with all the 808. Now what I do is simply lock the effect rack. So hit menu, lock effect rack, and you'll see that now it has a V. It's been checked. Now let's change preset. As you can see, the rack, the effects, are always the same no matter the preset. This is super handy once again. It's handy with everything. If you like a lead chain and you want to try it on other leads, what you can do is simply lock your effect racks, and then you can browse through your presets. It'll just preview all the sounds with your favorite effects rack. Pretty cool, very handy. Especially if you're, like rushing to find something and you don't want to mess around with the effects. This is a very good feature. At number 4, we have Wavetable tips and tricks. And this is another thing that you can find in this menu over here, and is render oscillator and resample oscillator. There are differences between the two. Some people know how to use it. Sometimes it gets really confusing. So I want to show you how to do it properly, and what happens, what you can do, how it works, and why sometimes it doesn't work. It might be the longest portion of the video because I'm gonna try a few things. So let's get right into it. Now, the first thing you can see is render oscillator warp. It's either oscillator A or oscillator B. Now let's open a sync into our oscillator A, and this is what we get. And now let's hit render oscillator A. Let's turn off everything here, and now we move this, and let's see what happens. As you can see, Serum rendered this warp into a new wavetable, and that's pretty awesome. The problem is that sometimes Serum doesn't do that. So if, for example, let's edit the preset again. For example, now I have FM from B. Let's open B. Let's take it one semitone, 1 octave higher. Let's put the level down. Typical FM effect. Now, if we do this, if we render oscillator A warp, look what happens. It's gonna tell me it doesn't do that, which sucks, but this is how Serum is designed. So what you can do now is resample to oscillator A. So now let's move our FM a little bit so we can hear the effect. And if we hit resample to oscillator A, let's hear what happens. You can hear that the wavetable now sounds exactly the same as our FM effect, but if I am moving it, you can hear that there's no warp effect. Like you cannot hear the sweep that I did with the FM warp. So basically what happens is that Serum just plays the note as it is without doing any sweep, and it will just give you the waveform as it is at that exact point, unless you modulate. So let's into the preset again, turn on oscillator A, 1 octave up, and now what we do is, well, obviously we decide to get the FM from B. What we do now is take our LFO, let's set it to envelope, and let's set it to a bar. Now we assign our LFO1 to the FM knob, and this is what we get. And now if we resample to oscillator A, and now let's get rid of this, we resample the whole sweep of the FM. This is how you do the resample if you want to do the resampling of the FM. Another thing that I usually do, for several reasons, I'm not really gonna lose too much time on that, but one of the things I like to do the most when it comes to resample oscillators is have my filter, once again, put it on envelope, because otherwise what you're gonna render is the LFO going up and down until the resampling is done, and you don't want that. You just want it to affect the whole parameter once. So now we have our LFO1 set to a bar and envelope, and what we're gonna do now, we are gonna control the filter, and once again resample to oscillator A. Let's turn off the filter. Now it messes up a little bit when it comes to resampling, as you can hear. The first frame is not right, but the second one mostly is. So there you go. This is how you use render and resampling within Serum. Very, very handy feature if you know how to use it. Now you do, so let's move on to the next function. At number 5, we have the hidden limiter. Another awesome thing in Serum is its compressor. Now, it's just amazing because it works good as a compressor. I'm not like in love with it as a normal compressor. However, I really like it when it's in multi-band mode, which is, it simulates the OTT. It's a very good setting for, to have stuff really banging and really in your face. One thing that people don't know, not everybody knows, is that you can move these bands. And the reason people don't know is that initially you couldn't do it, I think, and now you can. So obviously, you can set more bass, less bass. But another thing that you can do in this compressor is set it as a limiter. Now, all you have to do is go to ratio, and if you go all the way up, you'll see that at this point it clicks and it becomes a limiter. So now obviously you have to compensate with the gain. But at this point your compressor will be a limiter, and you're not going to get any clipping. Obviously you can still clip it if you go too high with the gain, but any effect that you're going to have before the compressor is going to be limited when you reach the compression stage. Now keep in mind, if you have anything that is after the compressor, the limiter is obviously not going to work anymore, because the limit only gets to this point. From the top to the bottom, at this point everything will be limited. But after this one, if you have an EQ and if you just do this, the sound is going to clip once again. So keep that in mind. And we move on to function number 6. At number 6, we have a very, very handy one, which is locking the parameters. Now this function is really similar to the lock effect rack that we've seen a few minutes ago, but instead of locking the effects rack, we can lock a parameter. This is actually even more handy than locking the effect rack. This is something I really use a lot. For example, I'm just going to show you. Let's get this cutoff over here. Let's move it here because it's easy to find cutoff all the way to 0. Now what we do is right click to the parameter, and you see over here it says lock parameter. Now this function is really like it's in front of you all the time, but a lot of people don't use it. A lot of people don't know it exists. I didn't know it existed until not long ago actually. So right click, lock your parameter, and now let's browse through my presets, and you see that the filter, it's always there. It never moves. Now, on the filter or whatever, it can be handy. It always depends on what you're trying to do. Now, there is, however, one thing where it's very, very handy, and it's the pitch band range. For example, you know, sometimes, especially with 808s, you create a little MIDI, and then you design this pitch band so that your kick bends just like this. Let's turn on the cutoff a little bit. You know, sometimes it's 5 semitones, sometimes it's 7 semitones, sometimes it's 1, sometimes it's 3. It really depends. Sometimes it's 12. It really depends. But let's say, for example, I have a MIDI where I am, you know, programming this 808 patch, this 808 sequence, and I have a pitch bend that goes up 5 semitones, and it goes down 7 semitones. Now, the moment I change the preset, if for whatever reason I want to be like, oh, I wonder how the next 808 will sound, you can see here that now it says 12. This is because every preset that I programmed in this library goes 12 semitones up and 12 semitones down. Now, we said before we wanted it 5 and 7, and what I can do now is right click, lock the parameter, right click, lock the parameter again on the bottom one, and now let's see what happens. You see, the parameter is always locked to 5 and -7. This is very handy, especially for the pitch bend. I actually only use it on the pitch bend, but once again, super handy. I love this function. This is awesome. But now it's time to see the last function. And like I said, I kept the best for last. So let's find out what it is. At number 7, we have the nerdiest one, which is changing the grid in the LFO section. All right, like I said at the beginning of the video, I had more to say about the LFO, but I want to have this one as a separate thing because this is very nerdy, and I think this is something that really not a lot of people know about. And so yeah, I think it deserved to have its own little space. Now we have our LFO, and let's put it to 8 in the grid. So let's create a little steps, and there you go. Now this is awesome how I created a little step melody, and if I would put this melody into semitones, it's really hard for me to tell where I am within the semitone range. And why is that? Because I have 8 steps going left and right, and I have 8 steps going up and down. And how many are the notes between an octave? They're 12. So how do I know which note I am in? It's very hard to tell because I have 8 lines, while in reality I would need 12. So if I put 12, nothing really happens because I have 12 columns, but I still have 8 lines. And oh, now I messed it all up. So let's go back to our 8. And what you want to do first is go to global and make sure that this option here is turned on. The double click for typable value on controls. This has to be turned on. Now let's go back to our oscillator. And what you want to do is go here and double click. But what you want to do now is 8, 12, and you hit enter. There you go. Now you can see that you now have 12 lines. So let's take all the way down. Now we know that if we go all the way up, obviously this is 12 semitones, but if you go halfway through, this is going to be 6 semitones. If we go just one step up, this is going to be 1 semitone. This is going to be 1, 2, 3 semitones. This is going to be 5, and so on. And this makes it a lot easier to create those little arpeggiated melodies with the LFO in Serum. I've done that for some preset. It's a nightmare if you don't have this guideline, because you always have to guess the position of your key, and obviously sometimes you're detuning. It's never really particularly precise here. Like I said on the first part of the video, if you hit Shift and Alt, you can snap to the grid and you're always going to be in the right note. And I think this is pretty dope. Obviously you can go higher than 12. You can do, for example, 24. That would be 2 octaves, obviously. Or what you can do is you can decide to start from the middle and then have this LFO being bipolar. So if you go down, you're gonna go down 12 semitones. If you go up, you're gonna go up 12 semitones. Like I said, this function is definitely a nerdy one, and it's not super easy to find, because obviously you have to double click, you have to know what to type, you have to know that you have to put a comma, and then you have to type your value. I don't think you can have a space, because if you have a space, it doesn't work. There you go. So it has to be your first value. The first value is going to be the column value, and then comma, and then whatever you want, 24 again, and that's gonna work. If you put a space, it's not gonna work. And yes, this is definitely one of the most hidden features in Serum. So let me know if you knew this one, and let me know if this will come handy. All right, guys, this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments down below if there are other hidden functions that I didn't mention, and if you found something that, it's not out there on YouTube or on the internet. I am really curious to know, and just share them with other people. It's always good to learn something new. If this video was handy, please hit that like button. And from me, David Seven Skies, I'll see you next time, and bye-bye.